How's it going, people? It's your boy Veedu Vidz in the house. I hope everyone is doing well. This video, as you've guessed by the title, is a reflection on my conversation with Sheikh Shabbir, which happened a few weeks ago. And I just want to say that I've got a lot of respect for Sheikh Shabbir. I want to say a massive thank you to him for even having the conversation with me. I think it's a big step in the discourse, Muslims and former Muslims sitting together, having a decent chat without anyone getting heated or anything like that. So I really enjoyed it. I'm a massive fan of Sheikh Shabbir. I also was a fan of his when I was younger, and I always thought he was a rational, reasonable person. So I just want to say, Sheikh Shabbir, I've got a lot of love and respect for you. And just as a human being, Sheikh Shabbir was very humble, very kind, very welcoming, very open. And there was no sort of, arrogance or anything like that. He was a very down-to-earth kind of guy, and I've got a lot of time for him and a lot of respect. So, Sheikh Shabbir, thank you so much. Much love from me. But I want to do this video because we were short on time in our conversation because, I think Sheikh Shabbir had somewhere to go. So I didn't have that much time to get into the details of what we were discussing. So this video is basically just to give people a better understanding of where I'm coming from, and just so you know what I believe and how I got there. I think it will be helpful for some people. I don't know how long this video is going to be, so grab a tea, grab a coffee, grab a drink, whatever it is. Let's go on this journey together. So if you see me looking down, it's because I've got a laptop here and I just want to read the notes that I wrote instead of just mumbling and jumbling through this video, so please excuse me if I'm looking down. Virgin birth and science. So I asked Sheikh Shabbir, how does a Muslim reconcile science with his faith? On one side, science is about rationality, about cause and effect, evidence, empiricism, and in religion you have miracles, which go against science, which go against the natural law. How does one believe in science and yet believe in their religion without compromising the two? So Sheikh Shabbir gave the example of, God created the universe like a Disney artist would draw every frame of a movie, and we are living in that movie, and every second or millisecond is a new frame which Allah has already drawn beforehand. So Allah does not need to intervene in this world. He has already drawn the miracle in the frames. So it may appear like God intervenes, but essentially the miracle is already written in the code. Sheikh Shabbir said that drawing every frame in a movie renders intervention unnecessary, but I respectfully think the opposite is true. Drawing every frame in a movie is an intervention, as every frame is literally dictated by God. It's the most interventionist you can get. Furthermore, this approach does sound very similar to occasionalism. The theory states that the illusion of efficient causation between mundane events arise out of God's causing of one event after another. However, there is no necessary connection between the two. It is not that the first event causes God to cause the second event. Rather, God first causes one and then causes the other. A simple example of this was given by the famous 11th century Islamic scholar Imam Ghazali, who said that when you put fire and cotton together, the cotton burns not because of the fire, but through direct intervention of God. So God has drawn a frame where the cotton is being burnt by the fire. So the natural laws of nature, like fire burning cotton, or an apple falling downwards from a tree, or even a man and a woman making a baby, may seem like they follow a cause and effect pattern, and miracles may seem like anomalies, but both the fire burning the cotton and the virgin birth are both God acting using his transcendence. They are both the same. One is not more rational or less rational. If you're God and you draw one frame with an apple falling down from a tree, and you draw one frame with a virgin birth, they're both the same. Translated into simple English, it basically means God can do whatever he wants. If you are a believer in God, this may seem obvious. Muslims say we don't need science to explain miracles like a virgin birth or a horse with wings and moon splitting, because God can do anything he wants. Okay, so my question to Muslims is, can God make 2 plus 2 equal to 3? Given the properties of 2 and given the properties of 3, can God make 2 plus 2 equal to 3? If the answer is no, then you must admit that God cannot do anything he wants. He cannot short-circuit his own code. He cannot create a universe with certain laws and then go against those laws. If your answer is yes, that God can make 2 plus 2 equal to 3, then my question to you is, why cannot the Trinity be true? Why can't 3 go into 1, 1 go into 3, the God, God, Father, Holy Spirit? Why can't God be the eternal being and also a man? If he wants to, he's all powerful. He can if he wants to. Who are you to put a limit on God's actions or God's attributes? He can simply draw a frame in a movie where he himself appears as his son in a human flesh and body. If you can make 2 plus 2 equal to 3, you've opened the door for all sorts of things to happen. Why can't God be in multiple forms, as represented in the avatars in Hinduism? I hear a lot of Muslims say that the Trinity is not logical, nor mathematically sound. But maths and logic are irrelevant. If God wants to create a frame in time where the Trinity exists, he can do it, and it is as rational as a virgin birth or 2 plus 2 equaling 3. Why are you putting a limit on God's ability? Once you open the door for God to do anything he wants and do away with natural laws, you can no longer play the Islam is rational card or Islam has scientific truths card. The whole approach goes against the scientific method. Also, given the fact that our knowledge in science has increased greatly over the centuries and will continue to do so, any inquisitive person equipped with the scientific method who analyzes religious texts will look for a creator who is consistent, coherent and rational, not for one who seems to perform miracles when he feels like it, especially in an age where people's knowledge of science was very poor and mythology was widespread. So this brings me on to the virgin birth. The reason why I keep mentioning this miracle over many other miracles in the Quran and the Hadith is because when I was a Muslim, I was a Quranist, which meant I did not rely heavily on the Hadith for my core beliefs, and I also believed that the Quran and science should be in sync, as Allah wrote the Quran and he also created the universe. What the scientist discovers under the microscope should not conflict with Allah's word. So I did not believe in the Antichrist, the Dajjal, or the second coming of Jesus, Burak, the horse with wings, and the moon being split in half. Furthermore, if there were miracles or verses in the Quran that contradicted science, I would opt for the naturalistic or symbolic interpretation of those verses. To give an example, I read the Adam and Eve passages as a symbolic story, not as a literal description of how human beings came into existence on earth. The main commentary I read was written by Muhammad Asad, who also wrote the famous book The Road to Mecca, which is a great book by the way. But the one miracle that I was not able to read metaphorically was the virgin birth. I could not find a naturalistic explanation for this miracle in the Quran. The only person that I found that differed from the mainstream opinion was a man by the name of Allama Ghulam Pervez from the Indian subcontinent, who interpreted miracles using metaphors and symbolism. But unfortunately, he was regarded as a heretic by Islamic orthodoxy. On a personal note, what I find interesting about the miracle of the virgin birth is that it challenges one of the most fundamental and natural processes known to human beings and animals. That is procreation, making babies. If your wife or your girlfriend told you that she was pregnant and you knew you had not had intercourse with her, would you seriously entertain the idea that God intervened and simply gave her the baby, made her pregnant? People believe this can be the case for a young Jewish girl that lived over 2,000 years ago. But would you believe it if it happened to you? And on another note, I found a very interesting comment in the comment section by Deals Durban, who wrote, "There is no virgin birth. A Hebrew word for young woman in Isaiah got mistranslated in Greek to virgin. Then when Muhammad copied the Christian scriptures, he copied the same mistake. The Greek Septuagint uses the word virgin, but in the Hebrew word means young maiden. Christians have incorrectly claimed that Jesus was born from a virgin, but that's false, and the idea comes from pagan mythology. Muhammad just copied the mistakes of the Christians. Very interesting comment. Thank you very much. Sheikh Shabbir said, you can be a Muslim and not believe Mary was a virgin at the time of Jesus' birth. Now, this is quite a big step in Islamic thought, in my opinion, as the vast majority of Muslims, if not all Muslims, believe Jesus was born of a virgin birth.
Just so I'm clear, when someone says, for example, Mary gave birth to Jesus and she was a virgin, you can be a Muslim and say Mary gave birth to Jesus and wasn't a virgin, and that is not compromising your faith.
To me, one can read the Quran in that way. But if one read the Quran and said, you see, one has to be sincere to oneself and to God. If I, as a Muslim, read the Quran and I look at it and say, okay, obviously this means that Maryam was a virgin at the time, and if I'm comfortable with that, that's between me and God. Okay. But if another Muslim reads that and says, wait a minute, why should we think that there's a virgin birth here? That, it doesn't actually say that. And maybe from the time of the Annunciation, like Mary was true in saying, no mortal has touched me, but subsequent to the Annunciation, things could have changed.
Sheikh Shabbir said, Allah also said to Mary,
that you will have a child, and Mary says, how can I have a child when no mortal has touched me? And the angel says, so it will be. When God decrees a thing, he only says to it be, and it becomes. Now, it's only a miraculous description here so far, but that's how the Quran describes things anyhow. If the Quran talks about rain comes down by the command of God and as a blessing from him. But of course we know that there's a process as well. And God actually describes a part of that process in the 24th chapter of the Quran, how he sets the wind gathers up the moisture, that then forms clouds.
So therefore implying that Jesus' birth was like any other, with a female and male having intercourse, and there was 9 months of pregnancy. Sheikh Shabbir said that the companions had a pre-modern or pre-scientific understanding of the world, which to me is obvious, but I don't know if all Muslims would take that position and concede that the companions or even the Prophet had a pre-scientific understanding of the world. This is because many Muslims believe that the Quran contains scientific miracles and the Prophet had knowledge which was not possible to have in his time and place. So at least with regards to scientific claims and matters, Muslims should not refer to earlier generations of scholars or companions of the Prophet, as their expertise was not science, and we possess greater knowledge of science than people in 7th century Arabia. Sheikh Shabbir said that he is not aware of any statement of the Prophet Muhammad clearly stating that Mary was a virgin at the time of Jesus' birth. As much as I welcome this, I do find this approach problematic. I asked Sheikh Shabbir how the Prophet Muhammad and his companions understand the virgin birth, and he said that we should prioritize where we get our Islamic knowledge from, and we should not attribute a greater status to the companions. But the reason why I asked how did the companions understand the story of the virgin birth is because if, for example, Sheikh Shabbir is correct that maybe Jesus was not born of a virgin birth, how is it that the vast majority, if not all Muslims, believe that Jesus was born of a virgin birth? If God wanted to make it clear that Jesus was born of a normal process, of a natural process, he could have made it very clear in the Quran. He has made it clear Jesus was not the Son of God, because this was a belief held by Christians, and obviously Muslims don't believe that, so he made it very clear that God has no son, God has no partner, no nothing. Very clear as a counter argument to the Christians. So for me, at best, this is very, very vague, and given the fact that the vast majority of Muslims of the past and of the present, scholars and common folk, believe Jesus was born of a virgin birth, I don't know how you get out of that. I really don't. That concludes my reflections on the first part of our conversation with Sheikh Shabbir. I would like to take this moment to take a break. If you want to get a drink, want to get a fag or whatever you want to do, press pause and we'll come back and we'll continue the second part of the reflection. And for those people who are still watching, I would like to take this opportunity to shamelessly advertise my cool t-shirts, which you can buy in the link in the description below. Please, if you like these videos, if you like what I'm doing, please support the channel if you can. Buy some cool t-shirts, or if you can help me on Patreon. If you can't do any of those things, not to worry. Please like this video, share this video, and get the word out there. Thank you. Alrighty then, so let's get into the second part of the conversation with Sheikh Shabbir. This was on blasphemy, on apostasy. The reason why blasphemy is a very important discussion is because in some Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, you can be punished by the state for saying something against the Prophet Muhammad or against Islam. This could mean anything from a fine to death. If Islam means peace, and the Prophet was sent as a mercy to mankind, and Allah is the most merciful, then why can't Islam or Muslims tolerate jokes, satire, or ridicule? And why is their response so harsh? I strongly believe that satire and ridicule are useful methods in exposing very bad ideas and can positively contribute to intellectual and social causes. According to Sheikh Shabbir, there is no Islamic ground for prescribing a punishment for blasphemy or for apostasy. Allah may punish you in the hereafter, after you die, but there is no punishment in this world. He quotes that there is no compulsion in religion as a categorical statement. The reason why I stand very much strongly against blasphemy laws and apostasy laws is because people, human beings, should be allowed to freely express their ideas so long as they are not inciting violence. If there is a such thing called the truth, the only way human beings can get to that truth if we are allowed to examine, if we are allowed to satirize, ridicule, explore all the different areas of human endeavors freely. The moment you say you cannot make fun of this person, this prophet, this political leader, this idea, you can't question this, you can't laugh at that, then we are drastically and dramatically narrowing our search of inquiry, and we can never get to the truth and understand the truth in all its aspects if we limit ourselves to what we can say and what we can't say. And the same goes for apostasy. No one should be punished for simply leaving their religion, for simply changing their mind. This is not peaceful, this is not just, this is not humane. And I'm glad to hear that Sheikh Shabbir has said that there is no Islamic ground for blasphemy laws and for apostasy laws. Now, of course, you may believe differently. Other scholars, other sheikhs may say otherwise, but they would have to argue with Sheikh Shabbir and not with me. With regards to drawing cartoons, the sheikh said there is nothing in the Quran against drawing cartoons, but there could be text within the hadiths which prohibits this practice. But it may have been borrowed from the Bible, as it is prohibited to draw images and worship them. Muslims are susceptible to influence from other communities and can retroactively justify any practice or belief which they think is a core element of Islam. Blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, not drawing cartoons could have easily have been borrowed or influenced by Judeo-Christian values. And yes, I'm using that term correctly. But why stop there? What about the story of the Antichrist? What about the story of the return of Jesus? Maybe even the night journey of the Prophet flying to heaven on a winged horse. Maybe these stories were also borrowed from Judaism, from Christianity, and from paganism. These stories are not in the Quran. That's all I'm saying. Sheikh Shabbir also said that in the books of tafsir, there are some narratives called the Israeliyat. These narratives are from Jewish sources. Many commentaries use the Israeliyat to explain the Quran. Some of these narratives may be useful in explaining the Quran, but some may go against what the Quran is actually trying to assert. I found this very interesting, as a small group of commentators of the Quran who used the Israeliyat sources could have skewed the meaning of certain verses, certain ideas or concepts in the Quran to the point where mainstream Islam look at these commentaries as if they are an integral part of Islam, as if they are a core part of Islam, when in fact they are influenced by Jewish sources. Now that's a Jewish conspiracy. And to finish off this video, I would like to touch on a point which I made to Sheikh Shabbir, which was, when you have a scholar of Islam in the modern world equipped with the scientific understanding of the world, do they have to refer to people who had considerably less knowledge and insight into the universe than them? Yes, it is always handy to refer back to gain an understanding of context and history, but we live in a different world today, and surely we are in a better position to deal with our problems than the scholars of old. Muslims believe that the Quran is protected by God. It has been memorized into the minds of thousands, if not millions, of Muslims across the world. Theoretically speaking, if we lost all the hadiths, all the commentaries on the Quran, all the different texts written by so-and-so scholar, imagine if we lost all of them, but we still had the Quran. How would we read? How would we understand the Quran in absence of these other supplementary texts? And more interestingly, what would Islam look like? It would be an Islam without the blasphemy law, without the apostasy law, without a flying horse, without Jesus returning thousands of years later to save the world, without the Antichrist, without stoning. That would be a very interesting theoretical experiment. That would be a very interesting new Islam for me. Personally speaking, it wouldn't be without blemishes, but I do think it would look considerably different. I think as Muslims, as any other religion, as any other movement, or as any other idea in the world, Islam has adopted things. It has inherited ideas and practices that may have not necessarily been part of its core message. And with Sheikh Shabbir, I realized that blasphemy law and apostasy law is the surface, because these laws are more controversial and more deadly, which is why we're talking about them. But what about other practices or other beliefs that are held by Muslims that could have just been borrowed by Jews, by Christians, by pagans, by Zoroastrians, by whoever? I think we need to have an honest and open re-examination of what Islam actually means. I think people, and this is my personal opinion now, Muslims want Islam to be this big, right? They want it to include all the works of the scholars and all the works of the different commentators and whatever, and all these different stories and hadiths. For me, when I was Muslim, I thought Islam was this. It's a set of principles. Very few principles that you're meant to live by. Islam is meant to be flexible. If it were a backpack, it would be nice and light. I would not need to carry every single tool individually in heavy boxes, in heavy bags, on the backs of elephants, following me wherever I went. That's not practical, and it's not efficient. I think the best ideas are the ones that are based on very solid principles, but are flexible and can meet the demands of wherever you are in the world, time, place, whatever. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for listening.